Martin, over to you.
Thank you, Yunhee. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to this session. We have something special for you today, which is China's first ever comprehensive national survey of natural disaster risks. And I think this is important because we know that the frequency of natural disasters has been increasing all around the world, but our ability to predict and to build resilience is still inadequate. And so most countries seem to be doing much better at reacting after the disaster took place than predicting and building resilience so that the impact of the disaster is less when it strikes. And as we're seeing the global climate change and the frequency of extreme weather events increase, just to mention one category of risk, I think unless we learn how to be better at predicting the impact of these disasters, we're going to pay increasing amounts of money to repair the damage once it has occurred. So I think this survey is going to be really critical in helping China further improve its own ability to predict and to build resilience. Having said that, we are particularly pleased to welcome today a distinguished panel, and I would like to acknowledge in particular the presence of Dr. Yuan Yi, the Deputy Director General from the Ministry of Emergency Management, who is going to join us online and speak just in a moment. I'd like to also thank the other panelists, Dr. Sun, who's joining us online from Harbin, and the speakers in the room, Dr. Gao, Dr. Li, Dr. Tong, and Dr. Yang. So thank you very much. I feel quite uplifted in the presence of such a strong panel of academics. Let me also say that we have a long-standing partnership with China in the area of disaster risk management. This started with the Wenqian earthquake of 2008, one of the largest World Bank disaster risk management projects globally, and one in which we learned, I think, an awful lot about how to do that well. In the Lushan earthquake, we also introduced not just reconstruction, but elements of building resilience and further risk reduction in our approach. And based on these two operational responses to actual disasters in China, we have built a strong knowledge program with Beijing Normal University to try and map disaster risks, but also changes in the policy framework. So let me not say very much more than this, just to welcome you once again. And I now hand back to Yunhee, who's going to moderate the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. So now I would like to give floor to Dr. Yuan Yi for her opening remarks. As Martin briefly mentioned, Dr. Yuan is Deputy Director General of the Department of Risk Monitoring and Comprehensive Disaster Risk Reduction at the Ministry of Emergency Management. In her capacity, Dr. Yuan is leading the survey work of the State Council's Office of the first ever National Comprehensive Survey of Disaster Risk. She's joining us from online. Dr. Yuan, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for your introduction, and thank you, Dr. Martin Reiser. Good morning, participants at the World Bank Beijing office and alone. First of all, I would like to thank the World Bank Group for inviting me to this important sense of the Understand Risks Asia Conference. Understanding disaster risk is to take stock of the baseline and the composition of risks, as well as the measures we can possibly take to mitigate or avoid risk, which is the priority number one of the Sanda framework for disaster risk reduction adopted by the United Nations. Risk is ultimately the result of decisions that we make. We make decisions about what hazards we are willing to expose ourselves to, where to build schools, factories, infrastructure systems, dams and decks, and how much to invest in the future. At the core of these decisions we are determining how our society organizes itself and cares for the vulnerable populations and assets. China is one of the countries suffering from the world's most serious natural disasters. This land is prone to almost all existing natural hazards, including earthquakes, typhoons, floods, and so on and so forth. Wide geographic coverage, high frequencies, and significant losses are the main features. Over the past few thousand years, China has developed a long history of disaster management. Now, China is facing an increasing number of risk factors, which are major challenges to sustainable development. Those include climate change, rapid urbanization, aging society, and ecological degradation. Strengthening disaster risk management and enhancing emergency response capacity is not only an urgent task, but also a long-term one. In recent decades, China has made tremendous progress in building disaster resilience. In 2020, China launched the first national comprehensive survey of natural disaster risks. This 3-year survey is aimed to understanding the natural disaster risk of China and getting a clear picture of the ability to respond to natural disasters, so that governments at all levels and various stakeholders can make risk-informed decisions on disaster risk management and sustainable development. I am glad to learn that this year's Standing Risk Asia Conference dedicates one session to China's first national comprehensive survey of natural disasters. I'm also glad to see the familiar faces of our top experts today as the speakers of this session. They are also the experts serving on our first national survey projects on hazard assessment, disaster risk assessment, and comprehensive risk assessment and zoning. I truly believe that we will have an interesting and rich discussion this morning, given their expertise and experience. Now, I would like to also take the opportunity to thank the World Bank Group and the Academy of Disaster Reduction and Emergency Management at Beijing Normal University for the joint effort in producing the bilingual knowledge note, learning from experience insights from China's progress in disaster risk management. This note covers the country's achievements in recent decades and touches on topics relevant to DRM practitioners globally. I am looking forward to further collaboration between the World Bank Group and China in depth, practical disaster risk reduction research and studies, and the application of their findings to relevant policy making, planning, and practice of risk reduction and resilience building. I wish you all a fruitful and insightful session today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yuan. So before we turn to our guest, we have a short video that was prepared by the State Council's Office of Disaster Risk Survey to get an overview of the ongoing work. So we'll play the video just now.
2018年10月，习近2018年10月，习近平总书记主持召开中央财经委员会第3次会议，部署自然灾害防治9项重点工程。 将灾害风险调查和重点隐患排查列为第一项工程，强调要开展全国自然灾害综合风险普查，于2020年至2022年开展第一次全国自然灾害综合风险普查，成立由王勇国务委员任组长，中央17个部门参加的国务院普查领导小组，全面组织领导全国自然灾害综合风险普查工作。
风险防治必须要搞清楚风险所在，它不仅仅是为提高自然灾害防治能力提供重要的支撑，也要为我们国家经济社会发展的规划布局提供重要的支撑。
作为建国以来首次开展的自然灾害综合风险普查，把握灾害风险定位，突出综合减灾需要，在全国范围内获取地震灾害、地质灾害、气象灾害、水旱灾害、海洋灾害、森林和草原火灾等6大类22种灾害致灾信息，人口、经济、房屋等重要承载体信息，掌握历史灾害信息，查明区域综合减灾能力，开展综合隐患调查与评估，开展单灾种和综合风险评估，风险区划和灾害防治区划，在统一的技术体系下，强化致灾数据和承灾体数据的有机融合，通过全链条式普查，摸清自然灾害风险底数，把握国家和地区自然灾害风险规律。2020年11月，全国31个省区市和新疆生产建设兵团全国试点地区成立普查领导小组及其办公室。2021年3月，全国所有市县均建立普查领导小组及其办公室，普查工作组织体系全面形成。2020年6月到11月，北京房山、山东蓝山率先在全国迈出普查实践的第一步，试点大会战先行先试，成果丰硕。2020年12月到2021年5月，全国普查试点工作开展得如火如荼，各部门各地方探索工作模式，检验技术规范，提炼做法经验。试点过程中，2次系统修改普查国家实施方案，90余项调查、评估与区划技术规范，综合风险评估与区划体系说明，89个大项、上千个指标的数据需求清单纷纷出台落地。1加10普查软件系统逐步上线使用，普查技术支撑体系全面形成。全国上下打造广播电视、报刊、网站等多媒体宣传矩阵，普查 logo、海报、标语精彩纷呈，普查新闻发布会应时而开，为普查全面推开奠定了良好的舆论氛围。
很多的部门、很多的团体、很多的社会力量都要参与的。这个普查结果重要，其实普查的过程也更重要。
随着普查工作的全面铺开，将推动各地各部门自然灾害防治和应急管理工作迈上新台阶。
Okay, so now we welcome our distinguished speakers. We will have 4 short presentations, which will discuss the state of risk assessment by different risk profile, earthquake, meteorological event, geohazard risk, and finally approach to integrated and comprehensive risk assessment. So before I introduce our guest speakers, I would like to invite online participants put their comments and questions in the chat box. I understand the technology setup here is that we will not have the online camera on, but your comments and questions in the chat boxes, they're mostly most welcome. So now I am pleased to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Sun Baitao. He is professor at the Institute of Engineering Mechanics of the China Earthquake Administrations. Dr. Sun is joining us from Harbin online. He pre-recorded his presentation, which we will play now, but he is available for Q&A sessions later on. Thank
Good morning. My topic of presentation is earthquake disaster risk assessment. How does China do it? My name is Sun Baitao. My presentation consists of following 5 items. I will go through them by each. China is a country with a prone of continental earthquake and a high seismic risk. The left picture is a historical earthquake distribution from the 23rd century BC to the present. The green point represents the epicenter of the earthquake before 1900. So there also has been many earthquakes in central and eastern China in history. And the red point represents the epicenter of the earthquake since 1900 to the present. This shows earthquake in China is can be everywhere. We have done a lot of work on the earthquake risk. As you can see on the left, that earthquake intensity can be given. The picture on the right shows the number of the distribution existing building in our country. What the government is most concerned about is where and how serious the earthquake risk. This responsibility fall on us. Anyway. And usually we use 2 indicators to measure the degree of disaster. One is economic loss. Another is death and injured. Following, we mainly focus on the assessment of economic loss, especially to discuss loss of assessment of building. Economic loss of disaster should be assessed according to the following formula. The first term is a seismic hazard at a different probability level and multiplied by the vulnerability of the explorer. Most earthquake disaster tell us the building loss account for the majority of the total economic. So the vulnerability of the building is a following we focus on discussed issue. The new idea rushed into my mind. We can classify the different area have a different seismic level of the building. The size of the area is given as a unit of the square kilometers grid. Then to establish the vulnerability of a various building in different seismic level area separately. On the left picture, there is a building seismic classification map in our country. Let's pick up one province, Beijing, to make this clear. Within each square kilometer grid is the mean. The seismic capacity of the building is different, and the various color indicate the difference of the capacity. And there are many structure types of exit building. In order to simplify the calculation, the first step should be reduce the structure type of the classification, so we can reduce the vulnerability analysis of the structure type. In general, the building with a similar structure characters and similar vulnerability are grouped up together. So we can classify existing building into 5 categories, as shown in the table. The vulnerability of the certain type of the structure in the square kilometer grid is usually given by the form of the vulnerability matrix, as shown in the left table. We can calculate the loss each grid by the following step below, and then sum them up. The economic loss of risk should be assessed according to the following formula we mentioned before. We have got the seismic risk, the vulnerability of the building, and the stock of existing building, the result of economic loss can be obtained by calculation. Left picture shows the distribution of disaster loss across the country, and the two picture on the right show the clear in distribution disaster loss in the form of square kilometer grid for two provinces, Beijing and Hebei, respectively. And also the loss distribution of 5 structure types in the Beijing was given separately. From this, we can realize which kind of structure causes great losses, and the proportion of each kind of the structure can cause the loss. Through above calculation and analysis result, we will learn which area are likely to cause more damage in the future. It can serve the government urban planning. At the same time, we can understanding which type of the structure cause the most damage and provide service for government and the individuals to reinforce their house. At the present, the most important point to provide the technology knowledge support to the insurance company and improve the public awareness, disaster consciously to go to the insurance. Sometimes the government is very concerned about what kind of disaster will be caused by the recurrence of the historical earthquake. In other words, the big earthquake scenario. At the request of our government, we made several scenarios of the historical earthquake. The slide shows the scenario of the Tangshan earthquake, which given what kind of the disaster result and how much economic loss and death if the earthquake happened again. Also, we can have another use, post-earthquake use. One is a rapidly economic loss assessment after earthquake. Another is for government disaster relief decision making. It provides technical support. Also, the post-earthquake recovery and reconstruction, etc. So much for my presentation. Thank you.
Good. Thank you so much, Dr. Sun. Next, we have two guests, Dr. Li Yang and Dr. Gao Gao, from the National Climate Center Division of Meteorological Disaster Risk Assessment. So Dr. Li will give a presentation and Dr. Gao will take questions later. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone here and online. I'm Li Ying from National Climate Centers. I'm very glad to have the opportunity to introduce and share the latest work about the meteorological disaster risk management in Beijing Climate Center under the CMA. And my topic is divided into 3 parts. First one, I want to introduce the motivations why we need to do this work, and secondly, I will make down these questions and talk something about the key issues in meteorological disaster risk management. And finally, I want to introduce a system. It's called the Meteorological Disaster Risk Management Platform, and I want to share some experience in our work and how to make use of the computer science and the information technologies in our work. Next. Okay, it's very familiar picture for us, and you know, China was dominated by the Asian monsoon system, so the meteorological disasters are various and widely distributed. Okay, and next one, and it also is uninterrupted throughout the whole years, and you know that the different disasters dominated in different seasons. And I want to show some loss data here in the next slide. Okay, this slide shows us the meteorological disaster loss in China. The left figure shows us the direct economic loss, and the the right figure shows us the fatalities due to meteorological disasters. We can see the figures, and you can get the information from these figures that the meteorological disasters in China is about, the yearly mean is about 13 billion US dollars, and it's about accounting for a high proportion of GDP, and the value is about 2%. But in latest 10 years, the proportion is have been below 1%. In the right picture, we can see there's a significant decreasing. I think it's mostly attributed to the disaster prevention and mitigation efforts we have made. The next one. Okay, when it comes to risk, the left figure is very familiar for us, and this figure is from the IPCC, and the disaster is a function of hazard, exposure, and vulnerability. And the right figure is proposed by WMO, and it's the global evolution of early warning system, and we can see the end of the arrow. Our ultimate goal is to establish the risk-based warnings. So the risk-based warning service is very important in CMA, and I think it's already have played an important role in disaster prevention and mitigation. So next, I will introduce some the current work in national climate centers. We divided the workflows in these 6 steps. And before risk management, I think there are many necessary components we have to do. First one is the data collection, and the most important one is the risk survey. I think the data is the base of all the work. So I think this is the purpose why we do this comprehensive surveys this time. And we collect the data and put the data in the models, specific models such as the hydrologic model, the crop models, and the random model to get the stretch code for the different disaster bearing bodies. And then we do the risk assessment. And the most important ones we can, as the meteorologist, we can have the forecasting information and use this information to drive the assessment model and draw the risk map. And this is the workflow in national climate centers. How we achieve these goals, we make use of the computer science. Next one, I will introduce the platform in national climate centers, and we have established this platform, and it involves 4 centers and the time limitation. I will introduce the most important one is the online analysis centers, the next one. And these centers involves 5 major meteorological disasters, and these are rainstorm, drought, typhoon, low temperature, and heat wave. And it has functions of disaster monitor, risk zoning, risk warning, and risk assessment. I will give some case here. Next, it's a real-time risk assessment of rainstorm, and in the right, the left picture is the layout of the system. This picture shows us the a rainfall size occurred on July this summer is have brought the a huge loss in Henan province, and we have already identified the more than 2,000 rainstorm sites in an objective ways. So we can monitor every rainstorm process and do assessment on population, economic, and the traffic. And we also can give a history ranking, and by the combined index, we consider it the duration, the event durations, impact areas, and its intensity. Okay, the next one. In addition to rainstorm process monitoring, the system can also tell us other information. The next one is the disaster losses data is also integrated in this system, and the data is from the Ministry of Emergency Management. Okay, and next one we can also this system and integrate the some hydrology model like HBV or flood areas. We can monitoring the no, not monitor. We can simulate the water depth in the small and medium river basins. Also, we can simulate the flash flood in the next picture. Okay, and the next one is we also calculated more than 200 threshold for the scale of the third level river basins. Next one, and we also calculated more than 3,000 threshold, flood threshold for in the small and medium rivers and for the early warnings, and also we by introducing the precipitation and the observations, precipitation and the forecasting informations in this system, and we can draw the risk map and issue the risk warning. And this is our functions of this system. And I want to show another one, and it's a risk zoning for the rainstorm, and it's also a very primary result. We also integrated in the systems, and we can check in the county scales. And the next one. Another example is for typhoon. You know, the Richmond has also brought a huge loss in 2019. And before it landed, we can use forecast information, especially the track information and the intensity near the typhoon center. And we use this information and the vulnerables curve, vulnerable curve, and predict the loss. And before it landed, we report the direct economic loss expected to be 50 to 60 billion yuan, and it's nearly the real. Okay, the next one. Another of land truth I want to introduce here is for this comprehensive survey. We established making risking zoning maps this system, and this system have already integrated the strategies and the method which adopted in this comprehensive survey. We just input the data and it can draw the risk map automatically. Okay, that's all my presentations. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lidis. Again, another very interesting presentation. So our next speaker, we turn to Dr. Tong Bin. He's Senior Engineer of the Institute of Geoenvironmental Monitoring at the Ministry of Natural Resources. Dr. Tong, over to you.
Yes, thank you. First, it's quite a great honor to be here to share the knowledge with the colleagues. And today I will, different with the other previous colleagues, I will talk about in terms of the geohazard risk, what has been done and what is doing and what will be done in the future. And since 2008, the reorganization of the government department, the Ministry of Natural Resources mainly focus on the prevention and mitigation of geohazard and provide a technical support to the emergency management, which is to the Ministry of Emergency Management. The next one. And I will talk about the basic condition of geohazard and what has been done that achieved, and also the major challenges in the future. And next, how we access the risk and also how we control it. Next one. And China, we know is one of the countries in the world severely by the mass movement. And right now, we have identified over 320,000 landslide collapse debris flows in China, and over 16 million of people and 50 trillions of economic properties are currently under the threat. And that's the basic condition. So we have quite severe conditions here in China. Next one, please. And we have also in the history have quite several cases that causing the damage and the extreme people loss in the past decade, and also have a very significantly negative impact to the local development. Next one. And based on the results, the survey results, we have also evaluate sustainability distribution in China, and the high to intermediate overall is about 404 million square kilometers. The next one. And also what we have done is we have established a more comprehensive framework that covering the survey, the monitoring, the early warning, and the comprehensive risk, what we including the relocation and engineering mitigations. So that's the mainly responsibility for the Ministry of Natural Resources at the different levels. And also we create, like we establish a integrated technology based on from space, sky, ground, like the remote sensing LiDAR, INSAR, to early detect the landslide, and also to monitor by using different types of equipment. And also we create the meteorological early warning program on different levels, and also incorporate with the other ministries to publish every day, especially in the flooding region and the seasons. Next, please. And also we have established 1.35 million for the people for the relocation in the past decade, and 24,000 of engineering mitigation project has been finished, and that's quite tons of work for the past 5 years, and that released 4 million people out of the risk of geohazard, but still have over quite several million people still under the risk of geohazard. And that's a few pictures to show the establishment of the monitoring stations, and also the new community for the whole county or whole village that far away or relatively far away from the geohazard. And that's a quite complex project has been doing in the earth-stricken areas in Sichuan, where is both threatened by the flooding, rainfall, and earthquake. So that's quite a severe damage. Next one. And since then, the number of people that the deaths has been decreasing over the past 2 decades, but still you can't avoid a very extreme event. That's one in 2010 in Gansu province. The one debris flow cost more than 1,000 people dead. So that's extremely high, but overall it's decreasing since then. And also because it's quite complex, the failure mechanisms and the triggering condition, that's really caused a great challenge when for the early detection and monitoring and the early warning and the risk control, because we don't really understand what caused it happen and how it happens and what are the influences, how far it will go away. So that's the key major challenges for now in the, I would say not only in China, but for the international community in the geohazard risk control. That's a quite great challenge for now. Yeah, next one, please. And also the climate global change is another important influence, because we have evaluated that the rainfall and temperature increase, it seems more significant than the average level in the world, especially in the Tibet plateau, and also for the south and the lost areas. It will gain more rainfall and the temperature increase in the future up to 2050, because it's quite complex geo-environment. So the two complex factors plus together will cause more uncertainties in the future. So that's one, just the other explanation, that in the Zhengzhou, the rainfall before and after the hit of the rainfall, the distribution of geohazard changed significantly. So that will tell us that it's not a steady condition, it's a dynamic condition. So we have to evaluate the working mechanisms before the geo-environment and the climate condition. Next, please. And also another challenge is the rapid urbanizations in the future. The human disturbance and also the geo-environment cause more unknown hazard occurred. So you can see the portion of the geohazard, especially in the remote regions, start to increasing over the past few years. That's probably because the city development expansion. Next, please. And another, what we are trying to do because of this challenge, we are trying to find out where the landslide is the geohazard is, how we map them, and then how we control them. So the very first important work is to conduct the detailed inventory based on different technology like field survey and RS technology to ensure to find out where the potential is. That's also part of the, I would say, the first national comprehensive survey. And also based on that, we start to mapping them to find out where are the unknown slides is. So that's why we create a different mapping on different scales from national to provincial to the municipal and the county level for different levels. Next, please. And also, we based on the new regulation of the new responsibility of the Ministry of Natural Resources, we have to take the highly suspectable area into the land planning and land use control. That's part of the regulation. So since then, each place for creating the land planning, they have to conduct the risk management, the risk mapping before they can tell the people what can be done, what cannot be done, and all the construction activities must be limited or under the supervision if it's in the risk areas. Next, please. And also, very important thing is to establishment the smart community, or I have to say it's a resilient community for the geohazard risk, because that's the responsibility for the local government. And also that's the, it requires, because that's the based on the rule and the regulations, the government have to take care of the geohazard. And also from the perspective of administrations, they have to involve the government, technology, and the local resident all together to build up a group to face the risk of geohazard. And the third is how we involve the technical support and how the technical, the STI, can play the roles in the whole system, which is to identify the hazard and also to provide as much as detailed early warning and the information distribution channel to all the people in the region. And then the last one, but also probably the most important one, to improve their self-production by to train the local people to understand the risk and to far away from the risk and do not do any disturbance or too much to trigger the landslide. So that's the four say the perspective from the national level to the local level, trying to increase the capacity to build a more comprehensive framework to counter the risk of geohazard in the next few decades. So yeah, that's my presentation over a big picture. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Tong. So now we welcome our last but not least speaker, Dr. Yang Saini. She's a professor from Beijing Normal University's School of National Safety and Emergency Management. She will discuss the approach to integrated and comprehensive risk assessment. I would like to highlight that Dr. Yang's school has also been a co-organizer of this event. So our special thanks to her and her team.
Thank you very much. First, I'd like to thank the invitation from the World Bank to this very important event. And also, since our previous speakers, they have already introduced very detailed information about the risk assessment in different ministries. So I would like to share some of the thoughts on this comprehensive risk assessment, especially on the context of climate change. Next slide. In BNU, Beijing Normal University has been working on natural disaster risk assessment for 2 decades, and we already published 3 generations of atlases. Well, this outcomes including like expected losses for seismic disaster, the risk levels for flood, and also like the expected loss ratios for multi-hazards. And this information has already been utilized in the zoning for catastrophe insurance in China. Next slide. But well, we are still facing challenges for assessment. And this is because the world is getting more connected. Probably everybody is quite familiar with these 2 figures. They're from the Global Risk Report generated by the World Economic Forum. So we see that the most challenging risk factors, they're closely related to each other. Right now, if we look at the right figure, we know that the one with the highest likelihood is extreme weather. And the one with the strongest combination of likelihood and impact is climate action failure. So, well, of course, there are a lot of other risks associated with these two things, well, including like food, infrastructure, everything. Well, next slide, please. Yeah, so this basically says like we need to have some new tools for comprehensive risk assessment. And another buzzword is disaster resilience. We have heard this for several years right now. Different from the traditional risk assessment, which is looking at the expected losses. Disaster resilience is really for a whole process. It's about the resistance capacity of a system when it's facing a shock, how it can mitigate the negative impact, how fast it can recover, and what is the adaptation capacity. So basically, resilience is no longer a measure for the expected losses. It's the measurement of the health of the evolution process of a system. So it's a process measurement. Next slide. So all this are basically pushing for a more comprehensive risk assessment. And the key is a multi-dimensional coupling. I can think of at least 4 layers. The first one is the coupling of hazards. We have different disaster chains, compound effect. Next, click. And then the impact on a system. Yes, the one hazard will hit several components in a system, but actually the impact is no longer, not only for these nodes, they are for an entire system. Next. And also in current modern society, all the systems are linking together. We have the interaction, we have interdependence, so the negative impact will cascade from one system to another system. So while we are looking at this comprehensive risk assessment, basically we're talking about how we can analyze this coupling relationship. Next. So for climate change risk assessment, I would like to take the framework for infrastructure. Yeah, we look at the climate variables, then we look at the risk to individual components of assets, then we look at the risk to a network, then for the interdependent infrastructure systems, finally, we go for systemic risk. Well, systemic risk becomes another buzzword right now. And I think the meaning of systemic risk, the key issue is it's a potential threat within a complex web of interacting elements. And that's a key difference. So how to understand that is a key to push forward our comprehensive risk assessment. Next slide, please. So in BNU, we also put an effort for about like 10 years to set up a comprehensive assessment model, starting from the hazards, then to the physical damage, go for network damage, go for functional impact, hopefully then right now look at the systemic impact on socio-economic system. And more importantly, is we are trying to apply all this model into the full cycle of disaster management. Only if they can be tested in different applications prior to a disaster and post to a disaster, then this can be really validated. Next slide. So of course, click. Yes, sorry, I shouldn't put the animations here. So basically, yes, we analyze the uncertainty, click. Yeah, for precipitation, whatever. So it's always there. We know that we're always making decisions with a lot of uncertainty. Next slide. And of course, we build up different models to move from physical damage to network damage. Next. Then again to a system's functional damage. So basically like synthesize different levels of simulation tools. Next slide. Then with these tools combined together, we will be able to quantitatively analyze different adaptation assessment, different adaptation measures to see, like for example, like for flooding, and if we have or with or without different adaptation measures, like how much physical damage you can save and how much system functional damage you can save. Next slide. We are also looking at the cost-benefit analysis for certain specific adaptation measures, such as early warning system. Here we use this the the Ministry of Transport data was about like 5 years hazards information. So we can analyze what is a macro level indirect economics and what is the direct losses. So we can see that this difference is huge. The indirect losses about like 10 to 20 times of the direct loss. And especially when we are using some economic models like CGE models to analyze what's potential saving of early warning system, the saving is huge. This benefit exceeding cost by a ratio of about 50. So this type of tools give us evidence, say how effective is our adaptation or measures. Next slide. So I just want to give a quite a quick summary that I believe that right now I shouldn't like move away. It's a plus. Yes, we definitely need a single hazard risk assessment, but also right now we are really addressing on the interaction between multiple threats, and also we need systematic assessment of complex threats and the risk, impacts, uncertainties, perceptions, and options. And especially, I hope that these tools can be used. Only with these tools, we will be able to analyze the potential trade-off of development policies and investment options. So again, I think I'm also calling for more work on collection of evidences from case studies. I think only when we have all the whole package, we can really help the resilience building in different regions. With that, thank you very much, and I welcome your comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yang. So that concludes our presentation. I wish we had a full day to talk about all this interesting issue. I think we packed a lot of very interesting and thoughtful and actually very, very relevant presentation to our work. So now I would like to open to questions either from online or from the room. Anyone who would like to come in, just raise your hand.
Thank you for the very informative presentations. And a little bit about myself. I'm co-leading the Lushan Earthquake Reconstruction Project and the Fujian Fishing Port Project. Both are in the field of disaster and risk management. So as Martin just mentioned, we're not only financing on the resilient infrastructures, we're also helping the local government to improve their DRM system or emergency response system. So while working on these projects, it seems to me that it's more easier to procure those softwares and hardwares and build and construct the command center and to even design the system. But it seems more challenging to finally put the system into operation and how to use the data collected. So my question to the speakers for today is how you see that you have done so much on this survey and collect all the risk-related information, but how are you going to use them? And what is the challenge in the real application of this information? Thank you. Because I know it needs a lot of coordination among different institutions and government agencies. And for the project, the difficulty we're facing is that it seems that there's some policy constraints in some information sharing. So I would like to hear your views. Thank you.
Why don't we collect a few questions and then over to the panels? I think Gianni first, I think you raised.
Thank you very much for excellent set of presentations. Two questions. The first, does the survey include information on adaptation capacity in a disaggregate, in a spatially explicit manner? And the second question is, what is your assessment of the current division of labor between the central government and again the local governments, whether that's sort of optimized or whether it needs improvement? Thank you.
Thank you all for the great presentation. I think both Professor Li and Professor Yang talk about the risk-based information system. So I'm curious about how to use this risk information to support the decision making, because I know a risk-based decision making process will enable the sustainable development and also resilience. So my question is, wonder if there's any example that you can share in terms of risk-based development, and what are the major challenges in using this risk information in planning and construction? Thank you.
I saw some other hands raised, but I think maybe if you don't mind, we can start, and then we come to, I've seen hands already, I registered them, so we'll come back to you. So who would like to take the first questions on the risk, like how to use risk information and challenges related to that? And then I think Wenyan also raised important questions on the coordination, of different responses and understanding risk. Anyone would like to come in? Or any other question? I mean, Gianni, I mean, we have 3 questions, so anyone who would like to come in first, and then. Dr. Su, would you like to first come in?
Yeah, I don't very clear the question is mean. So, 杨老师，你能帮我翻译一下？我没太听清楚他的意思啊。
他刚才是在问，就是现在的这些风险信息，有什么样的应用？然后呢，在这个应用过程中呢，有什么样的挑战？然后刚才就是文燕女士还问到了，就是地方的这些风险管理中的这个部门之间的协调，或者说怎么才能在地方上更好的用起来这些风险信息的问题？孙老师，您可以选择一些回答。
Yeah. Okay. So, or maybe one more year or 2 more years before, our government decided to carry out the nationwide risk assessment for earthquake disaster. Not only just for the earthquake disaster, but have another type of disaster. We have completed 11 counties assessment work already. So maybe in the next few years, the plan will be carry out the nationwide. Our research have established a system to provide the technical support. 我不太知道我回答的是不是符合他的意思啊。
It's all right. So maybe I can complement a little bit more information. I think William put on a very critical information is like later on how we use it, especially in local, right? I think for me, I don't know if everybody pay attention to the video, the last part. Our Minister Zhen said like the results is very important. Also the program, the process is critical, and this is because this survey for me is also a learning process and also a localization process. So this survey involves all levels of government. So the central level, the provincial level, city level, and the county level. So with this process, everybody has to participate in it. So basically, this is like the best awareness raising. Yeah. And also, since everybody involved in this risk survey, in the risk assessment, in zoning, they will have more idea. So with this process, they build up their capacity. Yeah, I do feel the same way. Like in the past years, we have very strong expertise in our central level. Yeah, but right now we really need to shift our attention to the local. I don't know if this answers your question. Thank you.
Can I have a 2-hander on this? Sorry, I'm the director, so I get the. I mean, the localization makes sense if the decisions that need to be taken to get more resilience are local decisions. So if you can decide not to build on the riverbank, or behind the particular mountain, or the building standards need to be improved and all buildings have to, in that region, have to satisfy certain criteria. But the localization becomes complicated when there are territorial decisions involved. And it seems to me from the maps that you showed that there's some pretty difficult territorial trade-offs. I mean, it's not a coincidence that China's population is concentrated in the coast because the risks seem to be much worse further inland. And yet, when you look at territorial planning, China wants to develop the inland for strategic reasons. That's going to be more expensive. So who makes that trade-off? Who makes that decision? Who decides that the northern plains should continue to be an agricultural powerhouse, even though there's no water in 50 years to do that? Who takes those decisions? Will your maps feed into those interterritorial trade-offs, which are difficult?
I think I will have view of my point view on the two questions. The first, I think, is how the data use and information was applied in the local, and the other is how the local and central government, how they're divide their responsibility. I think they're in the geohazard. Probably one question is how the communication or bridge established between the central government and the local government, because that's not only data but also the responsibility, how they cut from each other. And in China, based on the state council, the mainly regulation for geohazard are carried by the local government. That clearly indicated in the rule. But for the central government, they provide fundings and also the technical support to them. And that's not part, but quite a large amount, especially for the remote province. Therefore, for the risk data, the distribution, the risk information that recognized by the central government that have to be involved into the daily management of the local government. That's one process. For example, if they want to spend 1 billion or 1 million RMB to mitigate one landslide or unstable slope, that have to from the database, which is or connected from the central database to the local database. And that data have to be recognized by each level. So the data you have to use, not only use, but you have to recognize it and to be involved part of your daily management. So that's one of the, and then the other for the how they interact each other for the local and for the central is once they when we have for example, when we have quite severe rainfall in the flooding seasons, and after that, the report, brief report, will be sent to the central government, and then we'll send the field technical team to the local place, and they will working with the local technical support team.
Thank you. In the interest of time, we unfortunately will just proceed on to the next session live here in Singapore. Our colleagues in Beijing will continue on with their meeting and discussions.